Alright guys, welcome back to the Diablo How To series. We're trying to go over a lot of the basics with the game in several small videos to help some players out who may be new to the game, maybe new to Reaper of Souls, just trying to get a few extra hints and tips for starting to playing. And in this video, we're going to go over the importance of stats and what stats to look for on your gear. And we'll go over each piece here. And this is going to be the Demon Hunter, and I'll try and touch up on some other classes, perhaps in another video, or just kind of allude to some stuff. So we're going to go over some stats. I've been farming up quite a bit of gear, so a lot of this stuff, guys, these stats are going to probably look a little higher if you're, especially if you just hit 70, especially if you're a little newer. And so when you're looking for gear, the main thing is don't get frustrated. It takes some time to farm up the gear, but that's the fun of Diablo, is that loot hunt. You know, you're always out there looking for gear. One drops, you get excited about a legendary. You're always looking for those. You're always looking for set items, you know, stuff like that, stuff to improve, because you know we all want to do more damage. We all want to go around and you know, have fun and kill a bunch of stuff and farm gear. That's the spirit of Diablo. So we're going to look at this video, and we'll start with gloves. And actually, we'll go over the main stats here. We've got damage, which is it's self-explanatory here. The amount of damage per second you can deal. You know, this takes into effect all of your passive stats, all of your main stats, your skills, I should say, all the stuff that you find here in the offense tab under the details button here. So you've got a lot of stuff under the resource tab. So you know, we're looking at a bunch of stuff. Right now I've got 54% crit, 534% crit hit damage, and then some increased attack speed. And that all comes from the gear, passive skills, and other skills we might be running. So and gems as well. So we'll look at that here. So we'll start with gloves. And what you'll see here is I have 703 dexterity, which was a pretty decent roll. We've got attack speed by 7%. And we've got crit hit damage 33% and crit hit chance by 9. And these are all pretty good stats. This is referred to as the trifecta. You got attack speed, crit hit damage, and crit hit chance. And all three of these stats are going to boost up, you know, your damage. Now, your main stats that you're going to look for, and this is, you know, mostly across the board, and you know, there are certain classes that are going to benefit differently. If you can get 2 out of 3, good. If you're running with 1, you know, that's okay. But you're going to want to look for at least 2. If you can get all 3, that's great. And you know, if you only have 1 or 2 and you haven't enchanted anything, feel free to check out the enchanting video as far as you know, how to enchant and what to enchant, and you know, get a little bit more information there. But you know, these are the main stats, and for a lot of characters you're going to look for crit hit chance and crit hit damage, and a lot of it's going to depend on the other pieces that you have. You know, you don't want to go and just, you know, say, hey, I have 75% crit hit chance, but you only have 200% crit hit damage. You want to find a balance, and as you gear up, you're going to find that balance. Somewhere between 40 and 50% is generally pretty normal. If you got 54%, great. You know, we've got different stuff that's going to affect different things, and you're going to find out as you go along, you know, that you don't want to load up on just one stat. It's good to have one or the other. It's good to have all 3. But you also have to keep in mind toughness. And on this one, I don't have any vitality. I don't have any defensive stuff. So I'm trying to supplement that with other gear, with gems here, resistance gems, vitality, resistance. All that will increase my toughness. And so this one has a really good roll. And the other thing that you'll see at the top is fire skills deal 16% more damage. And the reason that's good, especially for my character, is because my main attack uses it turns into fire damage. So that's good. So I got a really good roll on these gloves, and we got the trifecta, we got the main stat, and we got the increased fire damage. So these are stats that you're going to look for. If you need more defense or if you need more toughness, you know, it's going to be important to have vitality or maybe all resist, but you know, this is an item generally reserved for doing a little bit more damage. We'll move up here to the shoulders. The shoulders is where, you know, there's not going to be a lot of offensive stats on there. You can get stuff that increase certain damage, but for the most part, you're going to get your main stat, you're going to get vitality. They can roll life percentage, which is good, and in this case also rolled armor. So this is a strictly defensive item for me. You'll also see on the secondary we've got 130 arcane resistance. So we've got that, and that could be important depending on how you're gearing up, especially if you're a monk and you're stacking one resistance. But this is pretty simple. So when you're looking for gear, especially shoulders, it might be, you just look for these base stats. There are some other things if you're trying to really, I guess, fine tune your character as far as what gear and what you need. So we're going to leave the shoulders for this video to the two main stats, and then life and then armor, and that adds quite a bit of toughness there. So we'll actually take this off. We go from 3.8 million toughness to 5.5 million. So you can see that you get quite a bit of toughness out of that, and that's something that you can look forward to. And we'll go back and we'll actually do this with the gloves. So I'm at 913,000 damage, and these gloves are pretty significant for my build. You can see the damage increase there. So this is the importance of the gear. So moving on to the helm, we've got the helm, and this is another one. It's you've got your main stat, you've got vitality. The helmet can roll crit hit chance between 4 and 6%. The higher the better, obviously, but these are stats you're going to look for. So when you're looking for gear, maybe you're one item off. In my opinion, and I think you'll see a lot of people running that socket is pretty big for the extra 22% life, especially if you can couple it with the vitality. And if you don't have the vitality, there's other options to increase damage to maybe one of your main skills that you're using. So let's say you have enough life, you have enough vitality, so that when you do run the life percentage, that it boosts that up to where you don't need it. So it's something to keep in mind when you're getting your helmet. Either you need vitality or you don't. Maybe you can substitute that out for more damage, but the sockets there. You can also run a yellow gem to run the increased magic find. Let's say you're running in a lower torment, you're running in a lower level, and you want to try and find some more gear. That's a good option. You can also run the red gem, which will give you extra experience. So those are things to kind of keep an eye out for. The next item that we're going to go over is the chest piece. So we've got the chest piece. Now, I don't have a lot of primary stats. You're going to have generally your main stat, possibly vitality, armor, and resistances. Those are all good things to look for because you're going to want to look for toughness as well as stuff that you can deal damage with. Now, this is good specifically for my build because of the secondary stat there, which reduces cost of fire skills. And like I said, my main attack is a fire skill that I have. So, and then the other primary, which we'll call it a primary, is the sockets. And it can roll 1 to 3 sockets, or it can actually run 0 sockets. But if you're trying to get sockets, which you generally want to, especially you want to get 3 for your chest piece, because you can see here, we've got some gems stacked in there. We've got 74 all resist times 2, and then we've got 220 vitality. So you boost up your gems. Let's say you've got 3 dexterity gems in there. It's going to boost up quite a bit of damage. And we'll look at this as well, because I've got 98 resistances as my primary stat, another 148 through the all resist, and then 220 vitality. And we'll look at the toughness here when we take this off. So again, we lose about another 1.9 million toughness there when we take that off. So we've got this here. 3 sockets you're normally going to want to look for. If you only have 1 or 2, maybe take it over to the enchanter and go ahead and enchant an extra socket or 2 on there. It could take a little bit of time. It's just the luck of the draw, but it's definitely worth having. That 3rd socket is pretty big. If you've got at least 2, you can get by with that. If you've only got 1, you might want to kind of keep an eye on maybe some other pieces that are out there. And we'll move down here to the belt. There's a lot of belts out there. Say you're playing a monk, the Thunder God's belt. There's certain belts out there that are going to have increased damage towards maybe a good build for your class, your character. So it's something to keep an eye on. Here we have pretty much a base belt. We've got the Blackthorn's belt. The Blackthorn set tends to drop quite a bit. And so this is just one of the things that we can look at. Here I needed a little bit more defense. I already had the pants that had 2 sockets in it. And you'll see the set bonus at the bottom. If you look just below there, 2 for the 2 set. You get an extra 250 vitality, and you get increased damage versus elites by 10%. So I got both pieces. I needed the extra toughness, and I had 2 yellows before, and each of these pieces by themselves weren't that great. But once I found the second one, I was able to put them together, get that extra 200 vitality, and it increased my toughness. My toughness was a little low. I needed to get into the higher torment levels, and this was a way to where I could supplement my damage as well as my toughness. And then you'll see the regenerates 895 life per second. That's going to affect the healing here. It's not going to affect your toughness, and that's where that stat's going to go. Outside of that, your belt is generally going to have a couple main stats. It could have an increased elemental damage. It could have other stuff that increases damage as well. So just kind of keep a lookout for that. They have a lot of interesting secondary stats as well. So depending on what class you're running, keep an eye out on that. One piece of gear could be better than the others. There's so many out there, it's kind of hard to go over them now. But these are base stats that you're going to want to look for. They also come with all resist, stuff like that. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Moving down to the pants, again, a lot of base stats here. Some of them will have increased movement speed. Some of them will have different items. The Inna's pants have crit hit chance and attack speed, which are amazing pants, especially if you can pick them up at 70. Here we've thrown resist all gems in here, and we'll go over that in just one second. But these are things that you'll want to look for. Your main stat, vitality, life percentage, and they could have all resist. They could have increased armor. And then if you look in the secondary, again, it's got fire resistance. So depending on what class you are, what you're looking for, might be good to have that secondary stat to keep an eye on that, especially if you're a monk and you're stacking one resistance. So in the pants, let's say you have high resistances already, you can throw any gem in here. You could throw dexterity gem if you're looking for, or a green gem for dexterity, or depending on what class, strength, intelligence, stuff like that. So it's important to look for that, guys. 2 sockets in pants is definitely needed, the same way that, say, 3 sockets for a chest piece is. So you're going to want to look for 2 sockets. If you have 1 socket, great. If you have 0 sockets, then it's definitely something you might want to look into as far as going to the enchanter. Next up, we've got our boots. Boots have possibility again of your main stat, vitality, all resist, armor. It also has movement speed. Movement speed, depending on where you're at gear-wise, it is sometimes more effective to move around a little quicker. If you're farming high torment levels, you're probably not going to worry as much about moving quicker. They have a chance to roll increased damage, and in this case it increases cluster arrow damage. I got a good roll on this, a perfect 15%, and that right there of course is my main skill. So increasing damage that way as opposed to, say, something like movement speed is definitely something to look out for. This is something, this is a really good item for me. Still looking for some legendary replacements, but in the meantime, it's going to kind of go along the lines. I'm not going to go into too much explanation so we don't keep repeating ourselves. But again, you're going to want to look for your main stat. If you got vitality, great. If you got all resistances, great. Those are all good stuff to look for, because look, if you don't have toughness and you die, it doesn't matter how much damage you do. If I had 1 million damage and 2 million toughness, I wouldn't survive in Torment 2, maybe Torment 1, So you gotta keep an eye on all that stuff. We'll move to the rings here. Again, we've got the main stat, and we've got what we referred to earlier as the trifecta. You can see the max stats on here again by holding the control key. This is a really good roll. You can roll a socket for one of these. You can roll just straight damage. You're going to normally want to look for the trifecta. Obviously, depending on what class and where your other gear is at, it could be different. But this here, I actually got both of my rings off of Kadala, who is the blood shard vendor, and just enchanted another stat. It did take quite a few blood shards, but it's definitely worth taking a look at, buying gear from her, keeping an eye on drops that you have, and then enchanting them. Sometimes you've got 2 or 3 stats, and you're just one off. Or let's say you have 2 of like 4 main stats that you're looking for here. You can roll 2 at a 4, and then you enchant a third one. And these are all stuff to look for. It's definitely a good idea to keep an eye on the stats on your jewelry for your character, and that should help quite a bit. Same over here, it pretty much looks the same. Attack speed, crit hit chance, crit hit damage, and then the main stat. That's all very good. And secondary stat again, it's all there. Arcane resistance, fire resistance. But generally when you're looking at gear, there's a lot of There's a lot of legendary items out there that are actually pretty good that don't have the 3 main stats. They might affect certain types of damage that you do for depending on what class you play with. So these are all things to kind of keep an eye out on. But if you're just looking for a base explanation, this is a good place to start. Same for our amulet. We got a pretty decent amulet here. Main stat, crit hit chance, and crit hit damage. And the good thing about these is the crit hit chance on this can roll up to 10%, and the crit hit damage on an amulet can roll up to 100%. So those are really good. And again, I've got fire skills, deal 18% more damage because that's something that really affects my build. And then we've got our main stat, which was kind of a low roll, but overall the item is really good there. So these are all things, again, amulets can have different effects too, especially if you get a set item, stuff like that. So it's definitely worth looking at for these different items as far as crit hit chance, crit hit damage. That's where your rings kind of come into play. They're not necessarily toughness items. They certainly can be, but this is something you're going to want to look for. Bracers. The bracers are also a little different. They kind of fall to me in the same line as the helmet, minus the socket, obviously. You've got your main stat, you got vitality. These can roll all resistances, armor, and all that stuff, but they also roll the increased elemental damage. This is actually a plan that I picked up, and we were able to. I actually got this on a roll. As you can see, I've done no enchanting to it. The secondary item here, especially me as a demon hunter, health globes restore 26% of my primary resource, which is hatred. This is a really good roll for me. The crit hit chance maxes out at 6%. I got a really good roll on that. I got really high rolls on dexterity and vitality. But this is all stuff you're going to want to look for. Crit hit chance, you're always going to want to try and find that on your bracers because you're going to find ways to do more damage. We take these off, we lose 130,000 damage. So we've got the vitality on there. Depending on where your life is at, I have 420,000. Perhaps you might need some resistances. You might have that, but in general, these are a couple main stats that you're going to want to look for. So keep an eye on that. Again, when you're out there, if you're one stat off, let's say you have crit hit chance, you have dexterity, and you have all resistances, but you have armor and you need vitality. Go ahead and roll that armor for vitality or something, or your resistances for vitality, and next thing you know, you've got a pretty good piece of gear. You can also roll the elemental damage on there, so maybe you have the 3 main stats, and you can also roll that on there for a stat that you might not necessarily need. Now the big item, and this is really hard to quantify, your weapons, and different classes are going to use different weapons. Some are going to use sword and shield, some of them are going to use 2 one-handers, some of them are going to use a 2-hander. In general, 2 one-handed items is where it's at, or if you're a witch doctor or a wizard, you're going to want to use a one-handed and an offhand. For a demon hunter, because of the passive skills, I'm using 2 one-handers. And again, you're going to want to have a socket in each one of these. The crit hit damage, I have 130% and 125% until I can roll another one. That's 255% crit hit damage that I've added to my my character. And I've got the main stat and a socket, and those are generally the 2 that you're looking for. And then you want to make sure that the white damage is high enough, which is the 2,393. The increased attack speed is factored into that, the same way that the 5% damage is also factored into the 2,405. So if you roll one of those away, let's say this didn't have a socket, it had something else, maybe it had the increased hatred regeneration, we take the 5% and we roll it into a socket, we might be missing out on that extra 5% damage, and it might not make it as good. So it's kind of good to keep an eye out, be conscious of what you're rolling on there. But all of this, all your gear, the main things you're going to look for, stuff that increases damage, stuff that increases toughness, and stuff that increases healing. So this is all stuff that you got to keep an eye on. If you don't have toughness, you're not going to be alive to do damage. If you don't have damage, and let's say you have 200,000 damage and 10 million toughness, yeah, you'll live and you won't die, but you're probably going to spend a lot of time sitting there smacking on one guy. So it's a balance. And you'll find that balance, just through playing more. Hey, I'm doing more damage. Hey, but I'm not surviving as well, and I'm in Torment 1. So you might need to, sacrifice a little bit of damage for a little bit of toughness. So It's all stuff that you have to kind of figure out. Same for healing. This is your life per hit, life per second, life steal. And then depending on what class you could have, life per fury spent. So there's all things that you have to keep an eye on, especially in your passive skills. You can add extra defense, extra toughness, extra healing. These are all things that you can look at and really balance out your character. I wish I had a more detailed explanation, but I think if you've been playing a while, if you've been gearing up, then you're going to find out just through general play what exactly it is that's going to affect you. So this is more for those folks that are just now starting out, just now gearing up, and really finding their stride and what they need. So this is a good place to start, guys. Continue playing. If you got more questions, I know there's a lot of good information out there. I'm really just trying to put it all together so it's not too overwhelming and just kind of put things in perspective. So if you got any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'll definitely be happy to answer those. We've got a good community of folks that are watching the videos that are also answering questions, and that's a good place. So keep an eye out on the gear, keep an eye out on the stats, keep an eye out on what might be best for your build, best for your class, stuff like that. But outside of that, guys, if you got some more questions, leave them below. We're going to be doing some more videos that go into some explanations of other beginner stuff. A lot of new folks that are playing. So we'll have more videos on that. This is covering just the basic gear and stat aspect and things you might want to look for. This isn't the definitive build. This isn't what you want to follow for every build. There's going to be a lot of other stats, resource cost reduction, extra damage to elites. We're doing a very base build here to just do damage and for this build. If you want to see how some of the builds are built and what they're built around, especially for gear and stuff, feel free to check out the links in the comment or in the description below. We've got some links to some builds down there that might help you out. Depending on, I have a few down there, so definitely check those out. Go ahead and look for more videos, guys. If you got more questions, and again, like I said, just go ahead and leave them in comments. Don't be afraid to ask. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully this helped you a little bit more. Until then, guys, happy hunting, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.